I want to share with you how we get a 60% acceptance rate for our podcast guests for getting booked on podcasts. And at 60%, what does that mean? For every three podcast hosts we reach out to, we get booked on two. For many people who reach out to me who have hired a VA or you've maybe taken the time to, invest in a database or a directory and start to cold pitch, this is what we call our warm outreach. So warm outreach always trumps cold pitching any day. Do you remember getting cold calls on the phone, right, at dinner time? Like they were never a welcome thing. But yet if somebody called you and said, "Hey, Angel said we should connect," or "you were referred to me by," now you've got a connection. So the difference between cold outreach and warm outreach is what we do differently here in the Need a Guest world. Number one, we build relationships with podcast hosts. We've actually attracted and created a community where podcast hosts come into us and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a guest." We do that in our Facebook group, the Need a Guest Facebook group, where we invite hosts to network directly with guests and they post their requests right there inside of the network. We then go out and build those relationships and we curate a relationship with podcast hosts and invite them into our directory. So our directory is filled with hosts that we have invited in, that we've built a relationship with, who have stated to us, "Yes, we are looking for guests. I need a guest for my show." There's no sense building relationships or pitching to hosts who don't even interview guests on their show. Their calendar's overbooked. They're not looking for guests. Maybe they go out and seek guests that they want on their show versus accepting pitches. There's a whole strategy behind it. For us, we invite only hosts into our directory who need guests. So that makes it really easy for us to connect our clients and make sure that our clients get booked much quicker and easier. This is how we create that 60% acceptance rate. And so, number one, build relationships with podcast hosts. That's what we do, right? We've done that by building our community and by networking and inviting our hosts into our database and to fill out that database and giving our clients direct access to that database. It's golden. It is absolutely golden. But as long as you're building relationships and connecting with podcast hosts, so hang out in communities and networks where podcast hosts are looking for guests. I also want to share my screen and show you just a few of the tools that we use as well. So if you're going to get booked on two podcasts a week, you're going to want to keep track of this stuff, right? So I've got a sample podcast booking tracking sheet that we can keep track of all of the shows that we have been booked on or we have applied to, all those we have accepted. And then you can click off when it's booked. You can put all your links here, who the host is, how to contact them once the show's been recorded. So now you have a one place where you can keep track of all of your applications, all of your bookings, right? All of your recordings, like everything in one place. This is critical because it's really easy. If you're going to get booked on 100 shows, it probably means you're going to reach out to 300 shows. So hosts. So every year we start a brand new tracking sheet, right? To keep us in line for all the shows that we have been that we've applied to, that we've been accepted on, that we've actually booked. And then once they've been recorded, the date of the booking, once they drop, like you can keep all of your notes. So I just recommend creating a simple spreadsheet so that you have everything in one place. We also have the podcast guest planner. If you just prefer to keep notes in person, the podcast guest planner is actually, let me grab it. Um, I don't know why it's always on the floor, right? But the podcast guest planner is a notebook where you can keep notes of every interview and every show host that you connect with, like all in one place. And then at the back of it, it also gives you like a little grid where you can keep track of all of your notes in one place. So actually, let me make sure that I shared that with you, right? So here's the podcast guest planner. Right? You can keep all of your show notes with every host, right, in one place, track of your monthly shows. It's also got some great tips in here for being a great podcast host. And then there's in the back, a little grid so you can kind of color them in and fill them in and keep track of 100 shows. 100 shows is only two podcast interviews a week, right? And so in a year, this whole thing could be absolutely filled, but having a great place to keep track of. And so what's our follow-up process? I mean, a lot of times I tell my clients, if we did our job right and you're a good fit for this show, the only reason you wouldn't be getting interviewed, right? Getting booked is probably it's a calendar issue. Their calendar's full, right? They're busy. Maybe they just put out a big promo. They just did a big ask for guests, or they went to a convention and they filled up their calendar. And so the follow-up sequence that I like to use, number one, is anytime I filled out an application or even book directly on their calendar, because a lot of our hosts give us their direct calendar link so we can go straight to the booking. Anytime I've done either an application or a calendar link, I like to follow up with an email. Hey, I just discovered you in the Need a Guest group on the Need a Guest directory. Wanted you to know I booked in for February 7th, right? Or I just filled out your application. Right, here's my details. We're building relationships with podcast hosts. We've done it for our clients. We've opened the door, but now you have to kind of grab that olive leaf, right? That olive branch and continue that, building that relationship. That's really what we're doing. Like we're building relationships with hosts because they're in front of our target audience, right? They're speaking to the people we want to speak to. Their audience is our audience. Their people are our people. So we want to really build that relationship with them. So the follow-up cadence, right? Immediately, if you filled out an application or booked on their calendar, send them an email. Right? If you haven't heard from them and you haven't actually gotten booked, then you might want to send an email, just a little reminder, maybe a week later. Again, it's probably a calendar issue, right? They're booked, they're swamped. So give them a little breathing room. And then after that, it's just monthly. Hey, right? Just want to get back on your radar. Are you currently booking for guests? I always like to tell people that I'm even available if you ever have a last minute cancellation, right? You can book me. So what do we send to them? What do we put in an email? I'm going to share this screen with you guys too. We recommend to our clients having a Google Doc that is for your podcast applications, right? Every podcast host, a lot of them have an application where they want your bio, they want your headshots, they want your talking points. And so I keep a podcast application doc where I can just copy and paste. I can do this while I'm standing in line at Disney and somebody says, "Hey, Angel, I need your bio. Here's a great show for you." Like a new show comes up and I want to apply to that. And so in this podcast application, I've got all of these different things in here, and it's kind of a growing list. But it has, my introduction, right? My last name rhymes with fussy. If you've got an odd last name or it's hard to pronounce, right? Giving them the phonetically correct way to pronounce it is always helpful. So I have my stage or my media introduction. Here's my 100 word intro. I have my podcast pitch, right? My subject line, a little bit about me. Here's my media interview questions if they want that. When I am introduced onto the show and I'm invited onto the show, this is my introduction. If I'm hosting a master class, here's all my social links. You probably want to keep all of your social links in one place because everybody asks for them and you want to make sure you have them in one place. Your call to action, right? Anything that you're ever doing, like with your free gifts or something, you want to have those. I've got my presentations, a couple presentations, like I've got a bunch of things here, right? And then I also have my headshots, super, super convenient in that same Google folder. So I can always upload my headshots into those applications. But here's the thing, right? You should be shooting for, so keep track. If you've got a spreadsheet and you can see how many shows you've applied to, right? How many of them have been accepted, you can start to kind of keep track too of what your booking acceptance rate is. Like I said, for our clients, we shoot for that 60% for every three we book two. And so when you have a tracking sheet and a way to track it, you'll be able to see what your acceptance rate is as well. One of the things we also have our clients do, like just do a 14-day challenge, right? For the next 14 days, go and get booked on one podcast a day, right? Reach out to one host a day for 14 days and start to create that momentum. When you first start in this space, right, you got to play the clubs, right? You got to get your feet wet. You got to learn the technology. You've got to learn the process. And the best way to do it, right? The path is paved by walking on it. Go and get booked, right? Next 14 days, give yourself the 14-day challenge. And let's see how many podcasts you can get booked on. Follow me at needaguest.com. That's where you'll join my Facebook community where we have over 100 podcast hosts who are looking for guests just like you. Cheers.